My lab partner was the ultimate genius in everyone's eyes, and I was always stuck in second place. She slept through AP classes and played League of Legends all night, yet she always aced every exam to secure the top spot in our grade. I studied until 2 a.m. every single night, only to lose to her by a single point on the GPA rankings every semester. People constantly mocked me. What's the point of grinding so hard? You still can't beat someone who literally naps through midterms. Some people just have the cheat codes. You don't. I swallowed those bitter words for 6 long years. Until 1 month before the SATs, she dragged me up to the school rooftop garden and said with a smug smile, "I'm going to tell you a secret. For 6 years, Aria, I've been able to hear every single thought in your head. Every formula you calculate, I write down. Every wrong answer you cross out, I follow suit. You've been taking all my exams for me. Now that I've secured my early admission nomination to Harvard, you're officially useless to me." Before I could even process her words, she shoved me hard. I fell backward off the roof. The blinding pain consumed me as I plummeted to my death, my eyes wide with betrayal. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the spring semester of junior year. I looked over and saw her face down on the desk next to me, napping. I couldn't help but smirk. On the day of the first unit test, she leaned back at her chair, waiting to tune into my brain waves. I opened my exam paper and lowered my head. Dit, da, dit. Her hand holding the pencil froze. Color drained from her face, inch by inch. I kept writing, but I didn't think of a single actual number. Just rhythmic static. Just Morse code. She panicked. Leaning over, she whispered, "What the hell are you thinking about?" I didn't even look up. The answers. Can't you hear them? When I opened my eyes, my fingers were tightly gripping a pilot pen. Spread out on my desk was the AP Calculus unit test paper. In the name block, Aria Vance was written in bold ink. Our proctor, Mr. Carter, tapped on the smartboard at the front of the room. The exam starts in 5 minutes. Clear your desks of any non-permitted materials. I turned my head to the left. Chloe Sterling was leaning back in her chair, her head tilted, sporting that signature smug smile I had endured for 6 years. Her eyes were half closed, her long lashes casting a shadow under the classroom LED lights. She looked completely relaxed. I knew that smile all too well. In my past life, she wore that exact same expression during every single exam. And now here I was sitting right next to her again. She was in her usual pose, waiting to intercept my brain waves. I stared at her for 3 seconds, squeezed my pen hard, and then let out a slow breath. "You may begin," Mr. Carter announced. I flipped open my test booklet and took a deep breath. All the clear numbers and formulas that had run through my head for 6 years shattered into meaningless, broken signals. Chloe's hand holding the pencil froze. The smile on her face stiffened. She scribbled a few words on a scrap piece of paper and slid it over. "Why aren't you reading them out in your head?" I glanced at the note, pushed it right back, and didn't write a single letter in response. She snapped her head to look at me, her eyes wide with shock. I ignored her. She didn't move a muscle during the rest of the math test. The second the bell rang and Mr. Carter collected the papers, she sprang up from her seat and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was incredibly tight. Her manicured nails dug deep into the sensitive skin of my inner wrist. Her eyes were bloodshot. "What were you thinking about? Why couldn't I hear a single thing?" I pried her fingers off my wrist, one by one. I looked straight into her eyes and let out a cold laugh. "The answers. Couldn't you hear them?" Chloe stamped her foot in frustration, but she couldn't find a single word to argue back. 3 days later, the midterm rankings were posted on the corkboard in the main hallway. When I walked toward the classroom, a huge crowd of students was gathered around the board. Complete silence hung over them. Zach Miller stood at the very front, his neck stretched out like a giraffe. His mouth was wide open, and the Starbucks breakfast wrap in his hand grew cold, completely forgotten. I walked up and glanced at the sheet. The very first line read, "Aria Vance, rank 1." The name on the second line wasn't Chloe Sterling. It was Ryan Cross from the honors class. Chloe's name was buried all the way down on page 4. Rank 142. The crowd stood frozen for 3 full seconds before the hallway erupted. Chloe ranked 142? No freaking way. Is there a glitch in the grading system? Aria, how did you do that? You finally got first place. Wait, didn't you always lose to Chloe by just 1 point? The tables have turned. Zach turned around to look at me, his breakfast wrap still hovering in midair. Aria, you beat Chloe by like 100 points. How did you pull this off? I looked at his wrap and smirked. With a pen. How else would I do it? Zach blinked, dumbfounded. while a few girls nearby burst out laughing. Then, a sharp voice cut through the noise from behind me. "Get out of my way." Chloe threw her backpack onto Zach's desk and shoved her way through the crowd, her shoulders slamming into a guy's back. She stood in front of the ranking sheet, motionless. Her eyes scanned the very first line, paused on my name, and then dragged down to the fourth page to find her own. The color completely drained from her face. It wasn't a look of sadness. It was the look of someone who had been violently dragged down from a high pedestal. She snapped her head toward me, her chin tilted up, her lips pressed into a thin line.
Aria.
Outside.
Now.
I leaned casually against the wall next to the corkboard. The rankings are right here. If you have something to say it here. Her eyes flickered, scanning the lingering crowd. Get out here. Leaving those words behind, she walked out first, leaning against the doorframe of the empty hallway, her fingers tapping impatiently against the wood. When I walked out, she straightened up. "Let's go to the stairwell." We walked into the quiet stairwell, and she turned on me. "How did you get that score?" I leaned against the handrail. "Didn't you just stare at the board for 10 minutes? First line, first spot. That's my name." Chloe slammed her Starbucks cup onto the windowsill. "I'm not asking about your score. I'm asking how the hell you got first place. I wrote the exam. That's how." "Stop playing dumb." Her voice suddenly escalated, echoing in the concrete stairwell. She slammed her palm on the windowsill, making her drink wobble and spill a few drops. I couldn't hear a single one of the multiple choice questions for math. "What the hell was that ticking sound in your head?" I tilted my head and locked eyes with her, a cold smile playing on my lips. "What goes on in my head is none of your business. Besides, how would you know about any ticking sound?" Chloe's lips parted, but she choked on her own words. She couldn't admit it. In my past life, she was so smug on that rooftop. But now, she didn't even dare to repeat those words. "Don't think you've won just because of one lucky test," she hissed, trying to regain her composure. "I've been number one in this school for 6 years. Everyone knows I'm the genius here. You getting first place just looks like a fluke." I stood up straight and adjusted the strap of my backpack. "Then go ahead and take the top spot back on the next exam. Aren't you the genius? Surely a genius isn't scared of one bad unit test. Do it yourself next time. Show everyone that you, Chloe Sterling, don't rely on luck." Chloe's lips trembled. She bit her straw so hard it completely deformed.
Fine.
"Just you wait." She kicked the heavy fire door open, letting it slam loudly against the wall. I called out to her retreating back. "Make sure you actually bubble in your answer sheet next time. Don't leave it blank again." Chloe paused for a fraction of a second, her shoulders rigid, before she walked away, without looking back. For the next 2 weeks, Chloe actually opened her textbooks. She stopped sleeping in class. She stopped playing games during study hall. Instead, she sat with a sophomore math textbook open in front of her. I glanced at the page she was struggling with, quadratic inequalities. Material from the first semester of sophomore year. She had been staring at that single page for 10 minutes, her pencil tracing random circles on her scratch paper. In our past life, she sat in that exact same spot while my brain ran through the entire derivation of those inequalities. She had simply closed her eyes, leaned back, and copied my mental steps line by line. She never took notes from the board. She never borrowed my binders. She only had to close her eyes to get an A+. But now, all she could hear in her ears was "did it." I lowered my head and went back to my own study guide, letting out a very faint, amused sigh. She heard it. She whipped her head around instantly. "What's so funny?" I put down my pen and met her gaze. "I just solved a tough problem. I'm in a good mood. Is that a crime? Why do you keep staring at me lately anyway? Do I have the answers written on my face?" Chloe's gaze went icy. She pressed her lips together and turned back to stare at the sophomore math page. During AP Physics on Wednesday, the teacher called on Chloe to solve a mechanics problem on the board, a basic block sliding on an incline problem. Sophomore level stuff. Chloe walked up to the whiteboard, spinning the dry erase marker nervously in her fingers. She wrote F equals MA on the right side, paused for 2 seconds, and squeaked the eraser over it. Then she wrote a force decomposition formula, only to erase half of it again. The classroom started whispering. "Isn't this a total freebie question? It's just sophomore force diagrams. You just draw the vectors and you're done. Why can't Chloe solve this? She used to ace physics." I leaned back against the desk behind me, crossing my arms as I watched her. Chloe stood at the board for almost 3 minutes. She wrote 3 different formulas and erased them all. The whiteboard was now just a smear of black ink. Her hand started to shake. The marker squeaked loudly against the board, the tip bending under her pressure. She tossed the marker into the tray. "Mr. Harris, I don't feel like solving this." Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses, his fingers freezing over his grating binder. "Chloe, what is going on with you lately? First the midterms, now this. Your physics grades used to be flawless." "I'm just not feeling well, Mr. Harris." She walked straight back to her seat and buried her face in her arms on the desk. She bumped the corner of the desk as she sat down, sending her pencil rolling onto the floor. Nobody picked it up for her. I leaned back in my chair, looking down at the rolling pencil, then at the back of her head buried in her arms. The second the bell rang, she lifted her head and glared at me. "You were laughing again, weren't you?" I closed my textbook and turned to face her. "You've asked me that twice today, Chloe. Maybe instead of worrying about whether I'm laughing, you should focus on your work. You haven't even finished that sophomore inequality chapter, have you?" The girl sitting in front of us turned around to peek, then quickly turned back. Chloe's nostrils flared, her eyes wide with rage. "Aria, don't get too cocky." I crossed my arms and smiled. "I'm not. I've just never seen a genius who can't even draw a basic physics force diagram. You used to beat me by 1 point on every single test. You were the genius and I was always second. So, why didn't you show us your genius on the board today? Your erase scribbles are still up there. Want to go back up and finish them?" Chloe slammed her hands on the desk and stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. The classroom went dead silent. A dozen students turned to look at her. Ignoring them, she bent down, bringing her face close to my ear, and whispered through gritted teeth. "You think you can ruin me with those stupid ticking sounds? I have a million ways to make sure you never recover from this. Just wait." Her voice was so low only the two of us could hear. I tilted my face, looked into her eyes, and smiled. "Go ahead and try. But next time Mr. Harris calls you to the board, make sure you don't use the sick excuse again. Do it too often, and people might actually think you're brain dead." Fuming, she grabbed her bag and stormed out of the classroom. While I was filling my water bottle at the cooler, Zach jogged up and tapped my shoulder. "Aria, what is going on between you and Chloe? You guys used to be so chill. You in second, her in first." I pressed the button on the water dispenser. "Zach, let me ask you a question. How do you think someone who sleeps in class and plays video games all day manages to beat me by exactly 1 point every single time?" Zach scratched the back of his head. "Talent? I mean, everyone says she's a genius." I took a sip of my water. A genius who can't even draw a force diagram? A basic sophomore question, and she couldn't write a single correct line. Zach froze, his mouth hanging open. I patted his shoulder. "Pay close attention next physics class. Let's see how many lines she can write then." On Friday afternoon during homeroom, Mr. Carter stood at the podium. "Next Monday is the midterm exam. The results will be factored into the early admission evaluation. Those of you hoping for the Harvard nomination need to lock in." His eyes swept over our side of the room. Chloe sat up straight, her chin lifting once again. She was incredibly sensitive about the Harvard nomination. 6 years of being rank 1 was supposed to guarantee that spot for her. But that was in my past life. Right now, her name was sitting at rank 142. After class, Chloe walked over to my desk, leaning down to whisper, "You better start thinking normally during the midterms. That Harvard nomination is mine." I put my pen down and looked up at her. "If you're so smart, what are you panicking for? Besides, for 6 years when I was stuck in second, I never came to your desk begging you to think normally." Chloe's eyes turned dangerously cold. She was leaning so close I could see her eyelashes trembling with rage. I leaned back and met her gaze, without flinching. "Aria, stop playing with me. You know exactly how I got those scores." I stood up, pushing my chair back, standing face to face with her. "We were barely inches apart. And you know exactly how you got them, too." 6 years, Chloe. Did you really think I'd just keep quiet forever? Well, the forever ends now." Chloe didn't reply, her lips pressed into a bloodless line. She didn't dare make a scene in a crowded classroom. I slung my bag over my shoulder and walked past her. "Let's let the exam sheets do the talking, Chloe." The next morning during study hall, Zach pulled me into the hallway near the water cooler, looking around suspiciously. "Aria, Chloe's telling everyone in class that you cheated on the unit test. She says you got the test papers in advance because you have a relative in the district office." I closed my vocabulary binder. "I got the papers in advance? Then why the hell would I have stayed in second place for 6 years? If I had the cheat codes, why would I choose to be second? Do I look stupid to you?" Zach blinked. "Right, if you had the papers, why wouldn't you just take first place earlier?" "But she claims you told her yourself." I scoffed. "She claims? Tell her to show the receipts." Chat logs, audio recordings, notes, literally anything. Can she? Zach swallowed hard. I tucked my binder under my arm and took a sip of water. Zach, use your brain before you help her spread this garbage. She dropped from rank 1 to 142. Instead of explaining her own pathetic drop, she accuses me of cheating. Does that sound logical to you? Zach stood there, his brow furrowing. As I walked back to class, Chloe happened to be walking toward me, holding a stack of physics homework binders. She paused when she saw me, her chin tilting up. What were you telling Zach? I didn't stop, asking him if you finished your sophomore physics homework. Chloe gripped the binders so hard the cardboard edges bent. Cut the crap. You were talking about the midterm cheat rumors, weren't you? I stopped and turned around, a mocking smile on my face. Which rumors? The one where you fell to 142, or the one where you're crying cheater because you can't cope? Chloe, you've been spreading lies about me all week. I didn't even come after you, and yet you're putting yourself in my face. The hallway went quiet. Several students stopped talking and looked over. Chloe's chin was up, but her voice was low and strained. Don't get too cocky. I'm not. I'm just asking for receipts. If you're going to accuse me of cheating, show the proof. Otherwise, shut your mouth. Just wait, she hissed, clutching the binders tightly as she stormed off. During the next break, Chloe was still whispering to a group of guys, claiming I only stayed in second place before because I was scared of getting caught, and that I couldn't help but show off this time. Hearing this from Zach, I slammed my prep book onto the desk and stood up. Zach tried to grab my sleeve. Aria, what are you doing? Clearing my name. I walked straight to the front of the classroom and clapped my hands twice. The chatter died down. 40 pairs of eyes locked onto me. Some people think my first place score was a fluke or that I leaked the test papers. Fine. Let's settle this right now. I want our math teacher to write 3 random advanced calculus problems on the board. Right now. If I get even one step wrong, I'll admit I cheated. The room was dead silent for 5 seconds. Then someone in the back whistled, and Zach muttered, "Holy shit." Chloe was sitting by the window in the 3rd row. Her knuckles were white from gripping her textbook. Mrs. Gable, the math teacher, adjusted her glasses, stood up, and took a piece of chalk. She wrote 3 complex problems on the board. When she finished, she put the chalk down. These are from a college-level prep syllabus. I haven't even taught these yet. I grabbed a piece of chalk, walked up to the board, and wrote out the step-by-step derivations for all 3 problems without hesitation. I tossed the chalk back into the tray, wiped my hands, and turned around. All 3 are done. If anyone still thinks I cheated, come up here and check the math. Nobody said a word. Zach sat in the back row, his jaw practically on his desk. A few girls in the front row started whispering. They're all correct, and Mrs. Gable literally just made them up. As I walked back to my seat, Chloe suddenly bolted upright. She stood there, her chin high, staring at me with pure venom. Who's to say you and Mrs. Gable didn't plan this? Maybe she showed you these problems beforehand. The classroom went even quieter. You could hear a pin drop. Mrs. Gable's face darkened, her grading pen halting midair. Chloe, I drafted these questions on the spot. I didn't even have them prepared. Chloe ignored the teacher, her eyes still locked onto me. I stopped walking, turned around, and smiled. Why don't you come up and write them then? Aren't you the genius who always got first place? Come up here and solve them with me. Let's do a live showdown. Chloe, show us what a real genius can do. Chloe's face turned from pale to ash gray. Her mouth opened and closed, but not a single sound came out. 40+ pairs of eyes darted from her to me, then back to her. She stood frozen for 10 seconds before she abruptly slammed her notebook onto her desk and sat down. The loud thud of her book echoed in the silent room. I sat back down, unzipping my bag to grab my textbook for the next class. Chloe sat next to me, her entire body tense, her breathing shallow and rapid. She didn't look at me, but the corner of her textbook was completely ruined by her grip. I flipped to the first page of my book and whispered, "Next time you want to call me a cheater, bring receipts. If you slander me again, I won't be as nice as just solving problems on the whiteboard." The quiet of the classroom felt heavy, almost suffocating. Chloe sat stiffly in her seat, staring blankly at her desk as if expecting the wood grain to magically reveal the answers she so desperately needed. I took my time pulling out my notebook, the soft rustle of paper cutting through, the awkward silence. Next to me, Chloe's breathing was fast and shallow. I could practically hear the gears in her head grinding, frantically trying to figure out where her cheat code had gone. On Monday morning, the midterm exam arrived. The entire junior class was shuffled into the grand lecture hall. Desks were separated by 3-foot gaps and 3 proctors, including the notoriously strict Mr. Carter, walked the aisles with hawk-like vigilance. As I sat down, I noticed Chloe had chosen a seat directly to my left, just one aisle over. Her eyes were rimmed with dark circles, her face pale under the harsh overhead fluorescent lights. She wore a thin silver ear cuff on her left ear, pressing her finger against it repeatedly as if trying to recalibrate some unseen frequency. She was desperate. She thought distance or physical alignment might fix her. Receiver. You have 2 hours, Mr. Carter announced, his voice echoing through the hall. No talking.
No glancing.
Turn over your papers and begin. The synchronized rustle of 200 test booklets filled the room. I flipped my paper over. Advanced AP Calculus and Physics combined into a single, brutal 3-hour comprehensive exam. I picked up my pen, took a breath, and let my mind drift into gear. Across the aisle, I felt Chloe's energy shift. She leaned back, eyes half-lidded, trying to tune into my brain waves just like she had for the last 6 years. I didn't just give her Morse code this time. I upgraded my defense. In my mind, I began layering complex, contradictory noise. Layer 1. The loud, frantic tempo of Rimsky-Korsakov's Flight of the Bumblebee, blaring at maximum volume. Layer 2. A continuous stream of deliberately reversed, mathematically absurd formulas. 1 + 1 is equal to 57. Force equals mass divided by the square root of blue. Integration of x equals 0. Layer 3. A sharp, piercing burst of Morse code every 5 seconds.
Dit addit. Fraud. Dit addit.
Parasite. Beside me, Chloe suddenly gasped out loud. A few students shifted in their seats to look at her. Chloe clutched her left temple with one hand, her face contorting in agony. The sudden wave of high-frequency mental static and violent noise hit her like a physical migraine. Her hand holding the pencil shook violently. She tried to write down the formulas floating through her head, but her hand betrayed her. She was writing down the scrambled garbage I was broadcasting. F equals m slash square root blue. She caught herself, staring at her own paper in absolute horror. Sweat broke out on her forehead. She slammed her palm against her forehead, trying to clear the static, trying to filter through the screeching mental noise to find the real
Aria vance.
But there was no real Aria Vance for her to steal from. My genuine calculations were locked behind a vault of pure white noise. Panicking, Chloe did something she had never done in 6 years. She turned her head and tried to physically peek at my scratch paper.
Top, top, top.
A heavy wooden ruler struck the edge of Chloe's desk. Mr. Carter was standing right beside her, his expression cold and unimpressed. Chloe Sterling, Mr. Carter said, his voice echoing across the silent lecture.
Hall.
Keep your eyes on your own paper. That is your first and final warning. Gasps rippled across the room. The star student, the legendary school genius, had just been officially warned for visual cheating. Chloe's face turned bright red, then ghostly white. Mr. Carter, I was just. Another word, and your paper will be confiscated. Mr. Carter cut her off.
Sternly.
Chloe swallowed hard, sinking into her chair. She looked over at me, her eyes filled with absolute terror and hatred. I didn't even glance back. I simply smirked, rotated my wrist, and effortlessly solved the final calculus proof on my page. 3 days later, the midterm results were posted. The hallway in front of the administration building was packed so tightly you couldn't even see the floorboards. Students were standing on tiptoes, taking photos with their phones, shouting in disbelief. No way, this has to be a mistake. Look at the top spot. Perfect score. I pushed my way through the crowd casually, holding a cold iced coffee. Rank 1. Aria Vance score. 100/100. I scanned down the list. Rank 2. Ryan Cross score. 92/100. Rank 3. Maya Lin score. 90/100. I kept scrolling down page 1. Chloe wasn't there. Page 2. Not there.
Page
3. Not there. Finally, at the very bottom of page 5 under the section marked disqualified. /incomplete. Rank 189. Chloe Sterling, score. 12 out of 100, flagged for academic irregularities. A score of 12. She had managed to bubble in her name correctly, and guess too. Multiple choice questions right before her brain completely fried from the mental static.
Aria.
Zach ran up to me, his phone out, recording the board. You got A. Literal perfect score on the hardest midterm in school history. And Chloe? Dude, what happened to Chloe? I guess the cheat code's expired, I said smoothly, taking a slow sip of my
Coffee.
Before Zach could reply, the heavy double doors at the end of the hallway burst open. A woman in a tailored black Chanel suit marched down the corridor, her high heels clicking like rapid gunfire against the marble floor. Her face was cold, sharp, and dripping with aristocratic arrogance. It was Victoria Sterling, Chloe's mother and one of the chief financial donors to the school's board of trustees. Behind her scrambled the school principal, Principal Miller, looking flustered and sweating profusely. And trailing behind them both was Chloe, her eyes red and puffy from crying. This is an absolute farce. Victoria's voice cut through the hallway like a blade, silencing the crowd instantly. My daughter has maintained a straight A record for 6 years. She is an early admission candidate for Harvard. To rank her 189th based on a single flawed, clearly compromised exam is malicious slander. Principal Miller wiped his brow with a handkerchief. Mrs. Sterling, please let us discuss this in my office. We'll discuss it right here. Victoria snapped, her icy eyes sweeping over the crowd until they landed directly on me. And I know exactly who is responsible for this sabotage. She pointed a gloved finger straight at my chest.
Aria Vance.
You've been harassing my daughter for weeks. You've spread vicious rumors, manipulated classroom environments, and I have high reason to believe you leaked compromised study materials to throw Chloe off. The crowd gasped. All eyes shifted to me. Chloe stood behind her mother, hiding her weak, trembling frame behind Victoria's power, shooting me a triumphant, spiteful look.
See?
Her eyes said. My money and my family will crush you anyway. I didn't flinch. I took another sip of my coffee, let out a soft laugh, and stepped forward. Mrs. Sterling, with all due respect, your daughter didn't drop to rank 189 because of rumors. She dropped to rank 189 because when she actually has to write an exam using her own brain, she doesn't even know sophomore level physics. How dare you?
Victoria hissed.
Chloe is a genius. Then let's prove it, I said, my voice echoing clearly for every student and administrator to hear. I turned to Principal Miller. Principal Miller, Mrs. Sterling claims I compromised the test. I propose a simple solution. Put Chloe and me in an isolated, camera-monitored room right
now.
Give us a brand new, unseen state-level honors exam drafted on the spot by external proctors. No notes, no prep, live stream to the school board. I took a step closer to Chloe, my eyes locking onto hers. If she beats me, I will forfeit my Harvard nomination, apologize publicly, and withdraw from the school. But if she loses, she gets expelled for academic fraud and slander. The hallway went dead silent.
Victoria sneered.
A ridiculous stunt. Chloe has nothing to prove to a middle-class nobody like. I accept. Chloe stammered out, her voice cracking. Victoria whipped her head around in shock. Chloe was trapped. If she refused in front of the entire student body and the principal, she was admitting she was a fraud.
She truly believed that if she
braced herself, if she focused through the headache, she could force her way into my mind and extract the answers one last time. She looked at me with wild, bloodshot eyes.
I accept, Aria.
Let's do it. I smiled. A cold, ruthless smile. Step into your nightmare, Chloe. An hour later, the small observation room in the science wing was prepped. 2 glass-walled booths sat side by side, completely soundproofed from each other. Inside each booth was a single wooden desk, a blank pad of scratch paper, 3 pens, and a sealed envelope containing a fresh, college-level advanced physics and mathematics evaluation brought in by an independent district official. Outside the glass, Principal Miller, Victoria Sterling, 5 department heads, and a camera streaming live to the auditorium watched in tense silence. You may open your envelopes, the intercom chimed. Inside my booth, I cracked open the envelope. The questions were tough, multivariable calculus, quantum mechanics basics, complex fluid dynamics. I picked up my pen. Before I wrote a single number, I activated my mental defenses. But this time I didn't just use static. I dialed it up to maximum overdrive. I projected a continuous, deafening loop of industrial white noise, metallic screeching, and pure gibberish into the air around me. In the adjacent glass booth, Chloe opened her envelope. She immediately shut her eyes, leaning back, trying to reach out her mental tendrils to intercept my thoughts. The moment her power connected with my brain, her body violently jerked. Screech. The visual feed outside showed Chloe instantly collapsing forward, her head slamming against the wooden desk with a hard thud. Chloe, Victoria gasped outside, pressing her hands against the glass. Chloe clawed at her own hair, let out a muffled scream of agony, and fell off her chair onto the carpeted floor, curling into a fetal position. Sweat-soaked. Her uniform collar, her brain completely unaccustomed to doing actual logic and, now bombarded by a wall of deafening mental feedback, was experiencing a total cognitive overload. She couldn't process the formulas. She couldn't read my mind. Her own brain was a blank, withered muscle that had atrophied from 6 years of absolute disuse. Meanwhile, inside my booth, my pen flew across the paper smoothly. Step 1. Step 2. Step 3. Solution. I finished the entire 40-page advanced booklet in 45 minutes. I stood up, stacked my papers neatly, and walked out of the glass booth, handing my completed test directly to the district official. In the booth next door, Chloe was still sitting on the floor, weeping hysterically, her blank test paper lying untouched on the desk, utterly pristine, except for a single smudge of her own mascara. The district official took my paper, ran it through the rapid grader, and checked the derivations manually. 5 minutes passed. The official looked up at Principal Miller and Victoria Sterling, his face
Grave.
Aria Vance, score 100%. Masterful work. He then glanced at Chloe's empty booth. Chloe Sterling, scores 0%.
Exam.
Unattempted. Victoria Sterling stood frozen, her face completely drained of color.
The
arrogance that had defined her for decades shattered into a million sharp pieces. No, this is impossible.
Victoria whispered.
Chloe, what happened to you? The door to Chloe's booth opened. 2 nurses helped her out. Chloe couldn't even stand on her own feet. Her eyes were glossy, unfocused, dripping with tears and
sweat.
She looked at me, her voice barely a whisper. Why won't you let me in? Just give me the answers, please. Aria, give me the answers. The entire room of teachers and administrators gasped. Give me the answers. Chloe had just confessed, in her broken, delirious state, right in front of the principal and her own mother. Principal Miller looked at Victoria with cold disgust. Mrs. Sterling, I think you and your daughter need to leave my office. The school board will be holding an emergency revocation hearing tonight regarding Chloe's standing and academic record. I stood by the door, watching as Victoria frantically tried to cover her daughter's face with her designer coat while ushering her out under the cold, silent judgment of every teacher in the room. As Chloe passed by me, I leaned in very close, my voice smooth as silk. You relied on my brain for 6 years, Chloe. Without me, you're literally nothing. The fall of Chloe Sterling was swift and merciless. By the next morning, news of the live stream disaster had spread across the entire district. The school board officially revoked all of Chloe's previous academic honors, pending a complete audit of her 6-year transcript. Her early admission nomination to Harvard was formally canceled and awarded to the rightful top student, me. In the hallway, people looked at me with a mix of awe and terror. Aria Vance is an absolute monster, Zach whispered to a group of seniors by the lockers. She literally destroyed Chloe in a live showdown without even raising her voice. I ignored the whispers and kept my head down, focusing on my studies. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. I knew Chloe Sterling better than anyone. In my past life, when she felt her position threatened, she didn't just accept defeat. She dragged me to the rooftop garden and pushed me to my death.
She was a
sociopath who believed the world owed her perfection. Now that her reputation, her future, and her family's prestige were burned to ashes, she had nothing left to lose. And a cornered parasite is the most dangerous kind. On Friday evening, 1 month before final graduation, I stayed late in the school science lab to finish my final AP chemistry research portfolio. The school was nearly empty. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody orange shadows through the high windows. I was packing my beaker set when I heard the soft click of the lab door locking. Behind me, I turned around slowly. Standing by the door was Chloe. She looked unrecognizable. Her long, pristine hair was matted and unwashed. Her eyes were sunken, dark circles carved deep into her pale skin.
She was wearing a
baggy hoodie, her hands buried deep in her front pockets. Chloe, I said calmly, setting my beaker down. The school building is closed. You shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here? Chloe let out a strange, wet giggle that turned into a raspy cough. I shouldn't be here? Aria, this was supposed to be my school.
My
Life. She took a step toward me. The smell of cheap alcohol and unwashed clothes hung heavily around her. My mother got fired from the board today, Chloe whispered, her voice trembling with intense, violent rage. My father is filing for divorce because of the embarrassment. Harvard sent a formal letter rejecting me forever. Everyone on the internet is laughing at me. You did that to yourself, I replied coldly. You stole my hard work for 6
years.
You built a palace out of stolen bricks, Chloe. Don't cry when it collapses. I didn't stole anything, she screamed, her voice echoing violently off the glass cabinets. She whipped her right hand out of her pocket. In her grip was a heavy, glass bottle of concentrated sulfuric acid, stolen straight from the school's chemical storage room. The yellow warning label gleamed under the dim lights. You ruined me, Aria, Chloe hissed, her face twisted in pure, unadulterated madness. You think you're going to Harvard? You think you get to live a happy, perfect life while I rot in hell? She unscrewed the cap of the acid bottle with her thumb. If I can't have my future, I'm going to make sure you don't even have a face to show up to graduation with. I didn't panic. In fact, looking at the bottle of acid in her hand, a cold sense of clarity
settled over my chest.
I had died once before at this girl's hands. I had felt my body breaking on the cold concrete below the rooftop garden. A bottle of acid? It was almost predictable. Chloe, I said, taking a subtle step back toward the demonstration counter. Think carefully. If you throw that, you go to prison for attempted murder. You'll spend the next 20 years in a concrete cell. I don't care. Chloe roared, her arm pulling back, preparing to splash the burning chemical straight at my face. I'm already in hell. She lunged forward, throwing her arm with all her strength. Swoosh. The clear liquid flew through the air in a terrifying arc. I didn't try to dodge sideways. Instead, I grabbed the heavy, thick wooden safety shield from the lab counter, a barrier designed to protect students during high-pressure explosion experiments, and shoved it forward like a riot shield. Splash. The acidic liquid slammed against the thick plexiglass shield, hissing furiously as it ate into the plastic coating, emitting a puff of acrid, white smoke. A few stray droplets hit the wooden floorboards, immediately sizzling and turning the polish black. Chloe blinked, stunned that her surprise attack had failed. Before she could recover, I slammed the heavy shield directly into her chest. Oof. The force sent Chloe flying backward, crashing hard against the glass chemical cabinets. The bottle of acid slipped from her hand, falling onto the floor tile, and shattering into pieces, pouring the remaining liquid harmlessly away from us into the drainage grate. Chloe scrambled on the floor, coughing, her hands scraped and bloody from the broken glass. She looked up at me, panting, tears mixed with dirt on her face. You, crazy bitch.
I'm crazy.
I dropped the smoking safety shield onto the counter with a loud
clang.
I walked over to her, standing right over her trembling body, looking down at her like she was a bug crawling on the floor. In our past life, Chloe, you dragged me up to the rooftop garden. Chloe froze. Her eyes widened in utter confusion. What are you talking about? Past life. You told me your little secret on that roof. I continued, my voice dangerously soft, dripping with ice. You told me you heard my thoughts for 6 years. You told me I took all your tests for you. And then you shoved me off the edge. Chloe stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. I never did.
That.
I never pushed you off any roof. You would have, I said coldly. In 1 month. That was your grand plan, wasn't
it?
Once you got into Harvard, you were going to eliminate the only person who knew you were a fake. I pulled my phone out of my blazer pocket. The screen was lit up green. A live phone call had been active the entire time, connected directly to the local police department and Principal Miller. Miss Vance, are you safe? Officers have just entered the building. Principal Miller's frantic voice exploded from the phone speaker. Chloe's eyes went completely hollow. The heavy lab doors were kicked open with a loud burst. 3 armed police officers rushed into the room, followed by Principal Miller and 2 security
guards.
Don't move. Drop on the ground. The lead officer shouted, drawing his taser and aiming it at Chloe. Chloe didn't even fight back. She sat in the pool of white smoke and broken glass, trembling violently, completely broken. as the officers pinned her arms behind her back and clicked the cold steel handcuffs onto her wrists, she turned her head back to look at me one last time. Who are you?" she sobbed, her voice barely audible over the police radios. "Are you even human, Aria?" I adjusted my collar, picked up my bag, and looked her straight in the eyes. "I'm the student who earned her top spot." The aftermath was catastrophic for the Sterling family. Chloe Sterling was formally charged with attempted severe assault with a deadly weapon, possession of hazardous contraband, and breaking and entering. Because she was 17, she was processed through the juvenile justice system with extreme bail conditions. Her family's liquid assets were frozen due to pending lawsuits regarding financial corruption and academic bribery involving the school board. The story hit the front page of the state newspaper. Parasite Genius, the fall of high school's top academic fraud. A month later, the day of graduation arrived. The morning sun was brilliant, painting the sky in vibrant shades of blue and gold. The school stadium was filled with thousands of parents, teachers, and alumni. Zach and a few classmates sat in the front row, wearing their dark blue gowns. When I walked past them, Zach cheered loudly, waving a huge foam finger with Aria #1 written on it. "Go get him, valedictorian," Zach yelled, laughing. I smiled, taking my place at the front of the stage. When Principal Miller called my name, the entire stadium erupted into a deafening roar of applause. Teachers stood up to clap, students whistled, and camera flashes filled the air. I walked up to the wooden podium, adjusting the microphone. From the high stage, I could look across the entire school campus, including the lush rooftop garden of the main building, glittering under the afternoon sun. In my past life, that rooftop was where my story ended in blood and betrayal. Today, it was just a piece of scenery beneath my feet. I pulled my speech notes out, looked out at the sea of faces, and spoke into the microphone. 6 years ago, someone told me that talent is everything, that some people are born with cheat codes, and the rest of us are destined to stay in second place. The crowd quieted down, listening intently. For a long time, I believed that lie. I worked in the shadows, losing sleep, bleeding for every single point, while watching parasites take credit for light they never created. I smiled softly, sweeping my eyes over the crowd. But luck runs out. Shortcuts crumble. And when the illusion vanishes, only those who built their own foundation will remain standing. To everyone who has ever felt stuck in second place, keep sharpening your pen. Keep fighting. Because no matter how loudly a fraud screams, they can never steal the truth from your mind. The stadium blew up in a thunderous standing ovation. The applause rattled the very glass of the administration building in the distance. 3 months later, September, the crisp autumn breeze swept across the historic brick courtyards of Harvard University. Freshmen were carrying boxes into their dorms, laughing, taking photos under the towering oak trees. I stood in front of Widener Library, holding a warm cup of coffee, wearing a heavy crimson coat. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a news notification from my hometown's local court reporter. I opened the link. Final verdict: Chloe Sterling sentenced to 3 years in a youth correctional facility, followed by mandatory psychiatric care. Mental evaluation reveals total loss of cognitive stability. The article detailed how Chloe, while in custody, had suffered a complete psychological breakdown, deprived of my brain to parasite off of, and unable to process basic daily tasks on her own due to her acute anxiety and neural atrophy. Her telepathic ability had completely burned out. She could no longer hear thoughts. She was left in absolute, empty silence, unable to even pass a simple high school equivalency test. She was locked in a world where she had to learn everything from scratch, starting from the very bottom. I closed the article and slid my phone back into my pocket. There was no hatred left in my heart.
No resentment.
Just a cold, peaceful sense of finality. I raised my head, taking a deep breath of the cool Cambridge air. In front of me lay the sprawling grounds of Harvard, endless libraries, infinite knowledge, and a future that belonged entirely to me. I took a sip of my coffee, adjusted the strap of my bag, and walked toward my first lecture hall, my footsteps firm, confident, and unstoppable.